You all are looking for some running backs off trade, waiver wire, whatever. Alexander Mattison had a good week last week, catching balls out of backfield. Zamir White was also getting the workload. We're going to look at the advanced data, the news, the metrics, and everything else to see whether or not you need them for fantasy football. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now because we're looking at the waiver wire every day. We're doing these deep dives every day to see whether or not you need these players. So you look at the data that I'm talking about and you're like, I don't like this guy. Oh, I need that guy. That's what it's here for. On top of that, we use these videos to help you set your lineups. Click that button. Stop missing out. But Alexander Mattison did well. 5 rushing attempts, 19 yards. But catching 4 of his 6 targets for 43 yards and a touchdown. So that is very promising for fantasy football. And he also got 36 snaps, out-snapping Zamir White, 60% snap share. So he's getting workload and opportunity. This is more of a split than expected. And then on top of that, the opportunity share, Zamir White won that with 13 rushing attempts, but he only got 5 rushing attempts, but he got the targets. The targets are money touches for fantasy football, especially in PPR. And you see that right here. 6 targets to Zamir White's 2, running 24 routes to Zamir White's 10. And then also in on 60% of the routes ran among wide receivers versus 25% to Zamir White. That being said, the workload in the passing game is very interesting for Alexander Mattison. But I want to pause right there because Dylan Labe, if he's on the field, might eat some of this workload, so we got to remember in the future, if not already stashed in your league. So I'm not sleeping on him. I'm just talking about Mattison right now. Mattison had 43 receiving yards, 62 yards off scrimmage, more than Zamir White, 16.2 PPR fantasy points. Was the RB16 for the week. Zamir White, the RB43. He sucked this week. Didn't hit for fantasy. And the game script lended for the Raiders to use their running backs in the passing game. When people are talking about Alexander Mattison is working the passing, they're not talking about the game script. But when you think about game scripts in the future, I do not expect the Raiders to be blowing out teams. There's going to be some game scripts like this with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, and they're going to be playing from behind. And the running backs catching the balls, Alexander Mattison, Dylan Labe, they're going to be functional in the passing game. And that could lend to them catching some balls out of the backfield, being productive. That's something to look at. And Zamir White, they're going to use him between the tackles, running the football. He does not catch passes. Historically at Georgia, historically last year with the Raiders, right now, he's not catching passes, and that's not great for fantasy football, especially in PPR. You can be a running back just playing a little bit of snaps, like a 30-40% snap share, but if you're catching a few balls each game, there's some upside to your game, especially you can catch it in the open field. But Ravens, Panthers, Browns, there's some matchups here where you're not excited. That week 3 matchup against the Panthers, maybe. It's also going to be a guess. Panthers matchup might be a Zamir White game, where some of these other games, like the Ravens game, where it could be more fast-paced, could be more of an Alexander Mattison, where he sneaks out 4 checkdowns out of the flat and gets you 40 yards, and there's 8 points right down. And if he gets it in the end zone anywhere, that could be a decent game. He's really a matchup-dependent play. And the thing about these two running backs, when you look at it, since this team runs it so slow between snaps, this is a backfield that you really don't want. This is a backfield where the touches are split up a bit. This offense is hard to depend on. Vegas is very slow between plays right now, as they are, because they run a lot of clock. They got a quarterback issue right now. A lot of opportunity there. Zamir White's got a lot of pop. Zamir White has the potential to come back and be productive. Alexander Mattison, though, is a dependable running back. You see this with the numbers. Zamir White, though, was productive last year, running it between the tackles, and that could come back anytime, especially in matchups where it's tight and the game script calls for him to get a lot of carries. They're able to get some separation up front, and he's able to run through. But Alexander Mattison, we hated him last year for fantasy, but he can also be productive. He can also help our fantasy football team, especially if he's getting work in the passing game. He's also very reliable between the tackles, pass protection, and everything else. This is a good split with 2 okay running backs right now, but you may not want this. You don't need it. This is a backfield that might be ugly, but if I have Zamir White, I may want this pair. Like, it's ugly to say that you want the pair of the Raiders backfield. Dylan Labe is a guy to pay attention to, if not just pick up and hold for as long as possible. You may not want this at all. it might be Halloween time and neither of these running backs are startable. If I had to make a prediction, that might be happening. Come Halloween time, neither of these two running backs are startable. That might be happening, and you're just putting them in your lineups because you hate yourself and you don't have any other running backs due to injuries and bye weeks. That might be happening too. But honestly, I expect this to get ugly. I don't think you need either of these two running backs. But the thing about this, you're going to want one of them just in case the matchup flows right, just in case they start scoring fantasy points, just in case things start looking better. Alexander Mattison right now, we're perking our ears up. You got to roster him, or he has to be rostered due to the workload in the passing game, due to those opportunities. Those are money touches that can help him in PPR. We still got a lot of season to be played. A lot of things are going to happen. But right now, this Raiders backfield's looking ugly. It's looking ugly. It's not great for fantasy football. Neither one of these running backs are going to win your league unless Zamir White starts taking over. That's the only way it's going to happen. Or Dylan Lave is just starting to catch a ton of balls. I don't foresee that happening. Zamir White has to do what he did in the back end of last year. Just starts taking over on the run game, start getting those opportunities. But right now, it looks like you're not getting much money out of this backfield, but you can scrape together some lineups with Alexander Mattison on the cheap if you're looking at him as a cheap get off the waiver wire here in week 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.